Hello everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today I'm working on day 5 of ByTheWell4God's Contending for the Faith. Now here I am using the newer Jude Alpha that was released alongside this kit, and I'm spelling out the word strive because I'm talking about Luke 13:24 today, which says, "Strive to enter through the narrow door, for many, I tell you, will seek to enter and will not be able." And in this devotional, Lori and Tom talk about this word strive and contend. And they say, do you get the sense of how focused and intentional your effort to contend should be? In light of this, other verses like Luke 13:24 take an added meaning. Strive to enter. The word strive can sometimes be synonymous with try, but we are not called to try to enter through the narrow door, but rather to fight to enter. So on this little label, I did type out all the definitions that I could fit on there for the word contend. So Tom writes to struggle, battle, agonize, strive, wrestle, compete, grapple, spar, tussle, vie, and pursue the faith with all of our being. So now this is going to turn into a whole layering process. So I did use some old ledger paper because I wanted something with texture and some age, but I wanted it to be clean for that strive word. I really wanted that to pop, and so that's why I stamped it on that ledger paper. But now I'm just working with all these different papers and textures that came with the paper pack this month, and so this is just a layering process. Now there are a lot of papers that I want to include on this page, so I'm going to make sure to trim them down enough where I can see what the pattern is on the background of the paper, but that it's not taking a bunch of space because I want a lot of texture and a lot of papers on here. So now I am using a glassine bag. This is part of the bag of bags that they are selling. It's a great deal if you love texture. I know a lot of the girls are actually using the bags to put stuff in, but my feeling is to just use them for texture. And you can see me here going around the edges. I have been doing that a lot, especially with fragile papers like that ledger paper, just to kind of lift up the edges. So here is some Foundry Wax. I haven't used it in a couple pages, and so I have to get back to it. I love this stuff, and it's going to add an edge to this glassine bag, which is going to make it look really nice, but also add some definition to it. Now, I know I've said this before, but make sure with the Foundry Wax that you work pretty fast. It starts liquid, then goops up pretty fast, and then eventually it'll just turn to dust. And also, don't forget to heat set it. A lot of times it looks pretty already without heat setting it, but you really lose all the shine that you could get if you don't heat set it, and it also will just kind of flake off eventually. Now I don't want all the sides of my papers to be the same, and so I decided to roughen up the edges of this one with my scissors. It definitely gives a different look. Some of them I just use my finger like I said before, and then some of them I will actually use the edge of my media mat or just tear them. So you want some differentiation with them, and so that's why I decided to do that. They also added this lace piece to the kit this month, and so I definitely want to use that. I'm just trying to figure out where exactly in the lineup of papers that I want that. I love this floral paper a lot, and I definitely want to see the globe and all the clocks that are involved, and so I am placing that paper vertically. It also adds some interest to the eye, so not everything is the same. Now here I come to this corner. You know me, I love bending the corners and seeing the back side of the paper, so I will punch out a little hole and add an eyelet. I'm making sure that everything is distressed, especially the torn edges, and then we'll start gluing this cluster together. Now when I first put this floral piece down, I do realize that it's too far in the center, and so I put it down and then realize it and have to move it over a little bit. But don't worry, as long as you do it fairly fast, that Barely Arts glue will let you tear it up. It does leave a little residue on the side, but I just use my finger to kind of rub it off and it comes out fairly good. I'm folding this lace back and forth like a fan and kind of in a half circle shape, and then I will attach it to the back side right under this contend definition. But first off, I'm using my tiny attacher to staple it to hold it in place instead of sewing it. It's much easier that way most of the time. And then I'm using my foam tape that will just kind of pop up this paper a little bit, especially since there's so much paper going on. I want something definitely popped up on this page. I don't like the look of flat paper everywhere. So now I want to add an ephemera piece, and I come to this horse with wings. It reminds me so much of the Kentucky Derby that just took place in 2022, and just striving and contending and trying to win that race. It just makes me think of what we should do as Christians. So anyways, that was kind of my thought process of using this horse, and it's just pretty cool. So I did fussy cut all the white edges out, and then I used a little frayed burlap on the edge for any excess of white, and that will just kind of tone it down because there's no white on this page. I did fuss a little bit with this horse's placement. I really wanted to get that perfect placement and have his head kind of popping out from the cluster, and so that is why I just, was fussing a little bit with this. I also added some foam tape to him because I definitely wanted him to pop off. Now I want to add a floral piece because the more the merrier, and so I decide on this simple yellow kind of daisy, and I'll just add a little bit of frayed burlap on the edges of that as well and stick that down in the corner. And now it's time to add my date. Now, honestly, lately I've been forgetting to add my date to pages, and it's super important to me. So I definitely want to get back into the groove of adding that. I did take one of the pattern papers and just use my tab punch. I'll add it to a tab down on the bottom. Now, I'm not adding a specific date, but rather just the month and the year this time, mainly just because it doesn't fit on the little tab that I punched out. But I will add that to my cluster with my tiny attacher, and now it's time to work on the background. So now it's time to work on this background, and honestly, here's where it gets a little haywire and I make mistakes. But mistakes happen, and I wanted to keep it in here. So at first, I took my frayed burlap. I just wanted a light background, basically so that there was some color, but it wasn't competing with the cluster I had going on. But then I remembered I had this loved floral stamp set that was released alongside this kit, and I decided I want to stamp one of the floral pieces down in the bottom right-hand corner, and I had plans to emboss it as well. But guys, my Bible is super chunky, so it's really hard to stamp in. I was trying to make sure that I had some hard pieces in the back when I was stamping, but it ended up double stamping, and I really didn't like the look of it. So we're just gonna pivot and move on. So now I come to my frayed burlap distress paint. I am loving distress paint lately. It really covers up nicely, although you can still kind of see it through. If you add just a couple layers of this distress paint, it really covers everything up. So I started with frayed burlap, but it was going to be too dark. I definitely didn't want it to overtake this background. So instead I do 2 coats of white picket fence on top, and it gives this beautiful taupey gray color. I love it. And so it's probably even better than the stamped image anyhow, or how I would have stamped the stamped image. And then I come back to the stencil. I'm loving the stencil this month. I really love the florals that are included on it. And so I am just using some plain texture paste and adding a little bit of white to the background. That's going to brighten this background up even more, but add some beautiful detail to the background. Now, as you can see here, it is a little tricky to get into the gutter of the page with a stencil, but if you work fast enough, you can usually scrape it off. Now, I do want to highlight the verses that I'm journaling, and after gluing this cluster down to the page, this page will be done. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. I'll try to link everything I used down below in the description, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.